Hi, welcome to the last of the mini lectures on the endocrine system. So we're going to take a look at the rest of the parts of our body that function as endocrine glands, or what we call minor endocrine glands. Most of these are going to be things that we've looked at in other systems, or we will look at as they play kind of a more major role in some other systems of our body. The first one is a good review, right? We looked at types of tissues at the beginning of the semester, right? So adipocytes, adipose cells, or adipose tissue, they actually produce a hormone. So in addition to being known as fat, they also produce a hormone that is called leptin. And so here you can see fat tissue producing leptin going into the blood. And as the blood travels around the body, one of the sites of action of leptin is in our brain. And what leptin does is it gives us, it's an appetite suppressant. So it gives us the feeling of being full. And it also influences the hypothalamus. It influences the release of some hormones that then further release or influence the pituitary to produce its hormones. And so it has also has effects on puberty and fertility and menstrual cycles. So there have been some studies done on leptin that take a look at its effect on people with obesity, and some people who have trouble with gaining weight have been found to have receptors for leptin that are defective. Basically, when fat tissue starts producing leptin, the brain does not receive the message of the leptin because it has defective receptors, and therefore those people don't experience the same appetite suppression and fullness from the release of leptin. So it's kind of an interesting hormone. The next minor endocrine gland is also kind of a good review here because we have skin. And so skin was the first of the body systems, or part of the first body system. We looked at the integumentary system. Remember, our skin has two major layers, right? The epidermis and the dermis. And then below the dermis, we have the subcutaneous layer, right? Which is mainly the adipose tissue. Remember, our dermis had a reticular layer inside of it and a papillary layer, two layers that made it up, and it had a lot of dense, irregular connective tissue. And then our epidermis, right, layers of flat cells and lots of keratin. So that was keratinized, layered, stratified, flat, squamous, and it was a type of epithelial tissue. But skin also produces a hormone. We looked at the role of skin when it is exposed to ultraviolet light. There is a hormone that it produces, cholecalciferol, which we better known as a form of vitamin D. And we looked at already this semester with skin and bone, the connection there between vitamin D and calcium absorption. Remember, as we expose our skin to sunlight, we form this hormone here that is vitamin D. Our next minor endocrine gland is the kidneys, and we're going to take a much closer look at the kidneys later this semester when we get to the urinary system and balance of water and waste and other solutes. Our kidneys' job is to filter our blood, but in addition to filtering our blood, they also produce some hormones. So one of the hormones that they produce is called erythropoietin. And this particular hormone is a hormone the kidneys produce when our oxygen levels get low, and it stimulates us to produce more red blood cells. And you just think about where we make red blood cells, where the target is going to be for this hormone, right, in our bone marrow. So in our red bone marrow, where that hematopoiesis, that production of blood cells, happens, red blood cells and white blood cells. And we're going to take a little closer look at that whole process of how red blood cells are made when we get to the module in the cardiovascular system. We take a closer look at blood. There's another hormone. It's another version of vitamin D, calcitriol, that is also produced in the kidneys. And there's another pretty important hormone that we'll take a better, closer look at when we get to the cardiovascular system and blood pressure, called renin. And so this has a role in regulating blood pressure, but it's also produced by the kidney. Okay, our next minor endocrine gland you should recognize here as being the liver. See the liver there? And it produces several different hormones. The first one is called insulin, like growth factor. And that's the one that you see here. And it has targets on fat cells and skeletal muscle and bone. And so it has an effect that regulates the growth of different areas of our body, like the growth of our skeletal muscle. Another hormone that the liver makes is called angiotensinogen. And angiotensin, we'll see, is related to the renin that we just saw coming from the kidney, but this has a role in also blood pressure regulation and balance of water in our body. Another hormone the liver makes is called thrombopoietin. Oops, T-I-N. And thrombopoietin is a hormone that regulates a thrombus, the blood clot, in the part of our blood that clots is called the platelets. And so it regulates the production of platelets. And there's another hormone that comes from the liver called the hepcidin and hepatoliver. This one works to regulate the levels of iron in our body. So while the liver we think of more as a digestive system organ, it does produce several hormones that function as part of the endocrine system too. That thrombopoietin that we see here coming from the liver, it is also produced by the bone marrow. So that same hormone there are cells within the bone marrow that also produces hormone that triggers the production of platelets, which are important for blood clotting. And in this picture, you can see the difference between the red and the yellow bone marrow. Remember when we were looking at spongy and compact bone earlier this semester, right? The yellow bone marrow is a site of fat storage, whereas the red bone marrow is where we see blood cell formation happening. So it also functions to produce a hormone. Here's our heart, and we'll take a much more in-depth look at the heart when we get to the cardiovascular system, but it does also produce a hormone. It produces a hormone called atrial natriuretic peptide, or it's often just abbreviated ANP. And this is a hormone that has an impact on our kidneys. So it promotes the kidney to get rid of sodium out of our blood into our urine, get rid of water out of our blood and into our urine, which is in turn going to have an effect when we get rid of fluids. It's going to decrease the volume of our blood, which is in turn going to impact our blood pressure. So that hormone is produced by cells within our heart. And then our last minor endocrine glands come from the digestive system. So like the liver, the small intestine, part of our digestive system, but it also produces a couple of hormones. One of them is called gastrin. And gastrin actually has an impact on another hormone, the digestive system, we'll see in a second, but it impacts the stomach. So its target is the stomach, and it triggers the stomach to release another chemical called hydrochloric acid. Other hormones that come from the small intestine, we also have a hormone called secretin. And secretin is a hormone that works to regulate the pH of the intestine. The intestine has a narrow kind of pH range that it needs to stay at in order for the enzymes that are in the small intestine to be able to function. The stomach, which would be, so here's the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. The stomach would empty out into the duodenum. And the stomach has to stay at a really low pH, right? So something in like the range of like 2 to 3. When that stuff moves into the duodenum, into the small intestine, all the enzymes that are there are going to work at a much more basic pH. So secretin works to balance the pH of the small intestine. And then the third hormone is called cholecystokinin, or it's abbreviated CCK. And literally it translates into chole means bile, cis means sac, and kinin means to move. So bile sac moving. It stimulates the release of bile. And bile is going to be released from the gallbladder. It also stimulates enzymes to be released from the pancreas. So it impacts both of those organs. And then the stomach, also part of the digestive system, but it does produce some hormones. It also produces gastrin. And gastrin is going to affect other cells of the stomach to produce hydrochloric acid. And then we have a temporary endocrine organ that I'd like to kind of mention, because you all have had one at some point in your life. Even if you have never carried a fetus, you were once attached to a placenta. And it's really a temporary endocrine organ for the fetus. So the placenta produces several different hormones. It does produce estrogen, which is an important hormone. It's also produced by the ovaries too, but it's produced by the placenta to help regulate the uterine cycle during pregnancy. Another important hormone that it produces is progesterone. And progesterone is a hormone that actually kind of maintains the lining of the uterus, that keeps it from shedding when the placenta is formed. And then there's another one called human chorionic gonadotrophin, or we often see it abbreviated HCG. This is the hormone that shows up in blood and urine after conception happens and implantation. And so this is what a pregnancy test is testing for, is this particular hormone. So when you pee on a stick and it changes colors, it's testing for the presence of human chorionic gonadotrophin. So the placenta itself, when it is supporting a fetus, it is also acting as an endocrine organ, but we call it temporary endocrine organ because it's not with you for very long. So that's kind of it for the organs and the hormones of the endocrine system. So in class we will take a look at some of the tissues under the microscope. We'll look at locating these organs. We'll do a kind of simulated lab experiment trying to figure out what hormones were injected into some different fake rats, and also some kind of interesting case studies looking at what happens when these hormones get out of balance, because hormones are important for regulating all kinds of things, and when any of them are too high or too low, they wreak havoc on our body.